Here's the next example. So use Lagrange multipliers to find the maximum and minimum of the function. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do, let's go ahead and start with number one, which is finding the Lagrangian. But notice that our g of x comma y is not in the form that we need it. So we need to make sure that it's set equal to 0. So this is going to give us x squared plus y squared minus 18 equals 0. Okay, so now to find the Lagrangian, our f of x comma y comma lambda, we're going to first take our f of x comma y, which is going to be 2xy, and we're going to add it to lambda times our constraint, which is going to be x squared plus y squared minus 18. Okay. All right, so now what we're going to do, now that we set up our Lagrangian, let me clean this up a little bit. So 2xy plus x squared lambda plus y squared lambda minus 18 lambda. Now what we want to do, we're going to take the partial derivatives. So that's going to be our step number 2. So we're going to find out what f of x is, f sub x. So f sub x is going to be the partial derivative with respect to x, which in this case is 2y plus 2x lambda, and then the last 2 go to 0. Okay, and then my f of f sub y, let me write it right below it. It's going to be 2x plus 2y lambda is equal to 0. And then f sub lambda is going to be equal to just x squared plus y squared minus 18. And I'm going to set that equal to 0. Okay, so now when we set our Lagrangian, that was the first step. The second step was to take the partial derivatives. Now we're going to go ahead and solve them. So what I like to do is solve for these two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve for lambda first. So here, I'm going to first start off with f sub x. So I'm going to have 2y plus 2x lambda equals 0. Let me solve for lambda. So I'm going to move the 2y over. So I'm going to have 2xy is equal to negative 2y. Now I'm going to divide by 2x to both sides. And I'm going to have lambda is going to be equal to, these twos are going to go away, so I'm left with negative y over x. All right, so that was my first solution. Now I'm going to use my second one, that was for f sub x. Now I'm going to solve for f sub y, which is going to be in this color. Okay, so I'm going to write 2x plus 2y lambda is equal to 0. Okay, so I'm going to move the 2x over, so 2y lambda is equal to negative 2x. Then I'm going to just divide by 2y, and I'm going to have lambda is equal to negative x over y. Okay, so here is my second solution. All right, now because these both are lambda, I'm going to set these guys equal to each other. So I'm going to have negative y over x, which is going to be this guy. It's going to be equal to negative x over y. All right, and now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to cross multiply. So I'm going to cross multiply. So negative y times y is going to give me negative y squared. And x times negative x, so there's supposed to be a negative there, negative x squared. The negatives and the negatives are going to cancel each other out. So I have y squared is equal to x squared. Now what you could have done is you can take the square root if you want to. Y equals, when I take the square root, I'm going to have plus or minus x. But in this case, we don't want to do that. And I'll show you why. Well, in this case, when I have y squared equals x squared, and it's easier to deal with the first one than it is to deal with the second one. And the reason why is because what we do after we solve for y or x is that now that we have a relationship between both of them, we want to be able to use our third equation, this one, to be able to solve for the other one, for the values of y and x. So let me change this to maybe orange. So I want to use my f sub lambda, okay, which is going to be x squared plus y squared minus 18 equal to 0. So if you see, x squared equals y squared. So all I have to do is just basically just plug that in there instead of squaring it again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug that in. So I know x squared right here is just equal to y squared. Okay, so I'm just going to write y squared in there because x squared is equal to y squared, based on this relationship right here. And then everything else is just the same. Plus y squared minus 18 is equal to 0. Okay, so then I'm going to have 2y squared minus 18 is equal to 0. 2y squared equals 18. I'm going to divide by 2, so I'm going to have y squared equals 9. Then I'm going to take the square root to both sides, but when I take the square root, remember that you also have to add plus or minus. So y is equal to plus or minus 3. Okay. All right, so now all I have to do is just figure out what my x's are. So I'm going to use this guy. So I know that y squared is equal to x squared. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find their pairs. So y is equal to positive 3 first. So I'm going to plug in positive 3. So I'm going to have 3 squared is equal to x squared. Okay, so now I'm going to take the square root. I'm going to simplify this. 9 equals x squared. Take the square root of this. So x is equal to plus or minus 3. Okay. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to plug in y equals negative 3. Okay, so I'm going to have negative 3 squared. Whoops. What happened? Negative 3 squared is equal to x squared. This is still going to give me 9 equals x squared. So x is equal to plus or minus 3. Okay. Now let's look at all the pairs. So what we have here is that we have x equals plus or minus 3 with a 3. So let's look at all our pairs, x and y. So my first one was plus or minus 3 for x for a 3 with y. So that was my first one right there. My second one, my second point, x and y, is also equal to plus or minus 3, but then the other one, the y, is a negative 3. Okay, so what are going to be all my points? All my points are going to be positive 3 and 3, negative 3 and 3. Whoops. Negative 3 and 3. And then for my second ones, it's also positive 3, negative 3, and then negative 3, negative 3. Okay, so here are all my possibilities. These are all my possible points. All right. Now what I want to do, I want to figure out what x and y is. Or I want to figure out what my maximum and minimum values are. Okay, because I already figured out what my x's and my y's are. So all I got to do is now step 3, which is plug everything in there. Okay, so number 3, step 3 is plug in. Okay, so my original function, if I go all the way back up, is 2xy. So I have f of x comma y equals 2xy. And all I got to do is just plug in all of these points. So I'm going to plug in first 3 comma 3. So I'm going to get 2 times 3 times 3. This is going to give me 18. Okay, then I'm going to plug in the second one, f of negative 3 comma 3. That's going to be 2 times negative 3 times 3. That's going to give me negative 18. Then I'm going to plug in f of 3 comma negative 3. So it's 2 times 3 times negative 3, which gives me another negative 18. And then I'm going to plug in f of negative 3 comma negative 3. Just 2 times negative 3 times negative 3, which gives me positive 18. Okay, so these are all my values. So at each of these points, these are the values of z, I guess. All right, so my maximum, which is the biggest number? Well, the maximum is going to be 18 because that's the biggest number. And then my minimum is going to be negative 18 because that's the smallest number. So that's my maximum and that's my minimum. Okay, so same thing. We just ended up having a little bit more points with step number 2. But then afterwards, same thing. We just plug it back in to figure out our max and our min.